Yeah, let's jump into a few seconds from this presser from Von Miller talking about, again, how success leaves clues.
And Greg, we all went to the Pass Rush Summit, and I call it the summit. I call it the summit and not the clinic because it's not a place where I go and I just everybody listen to Von. It's a summit of all the great players in the league, all the great pass rushers in the league, and it's just a space that I created that we all make go. And I've always been a fan of just being around great players, being around great talent, and success leaves clues. And we had a lot of successful pass rushers there. The Pass Rush Summit, Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, all these guys, Justin Houston, all these guys came. And I just feel like success leaves clues. And whenever you get complacent, I feel like that's when you go downhill. Each and every year I try to learn something. It doesn't matter if I got 200 sacks. I'm trying to get 201 sacks. So,
yeah, that quote right there just blew me away. I was doing something with the kids, and then I heard that. I was like, whoa, like that, type of self-awareness, understanding that, hey, he's a future Hall of Famer, and he's trying to improve every year. He's trying to study the Max Crosby's, the Chandler Jones, the guys that have success year in and year out, and take parts of their game and things they do, how they set up offensive tackles. That is why he's a future Hall of Famer. That's why the Bills brought him in and paid him, obviously a really lucrative contract. And as fans, all we can do is hope that, those young pass rushers can soak up that mentality and some of those things that they learned at the summit.
It's funny. I saw several clips from the summit, and two that really stuck out for me in relation to Von Miller were Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, and they were each talking. They were, doing what they do in the summit there. Like they had somebody in front of them and they were diagnosing like, okay, like here's how I like to attack, and I like to set up this move, and I'll do this, which leads to this later. And Von was in the background of the camera, and he was straight sitting there and like focused, like watching. Yeah. He wasn't like kind of dicking around or not paying attention or being like, well, this is my summit, so whatever. Like he was focused and locked in. And the whole success leaves clues thing, it makes sense for him. And it's also, I think, applicable to part of the cyclical nature of the NFL. It's the reason why you see so many teams pick up on things like the West Coast offense hit and was so successful. And everybody's like, oh, we got to do some of that. Or the Tampa 2 defense or the Seattle cover 3, or now we're seeing more, more too high looks and light boxes and gap and a half and stuff like that. When teams and coaches and players start to see what has worked and they start to see what success is, they start to pull at those clues a little bit and try and piece it together themselves. And I think that goes in hand with part of that cyclical nature you see from the individual level, but also from a team or holistic level at the NFL or football in general, because teams and players and coaches see what works and they try to emulate it.
Yeah, that's what's really exciting about the whole thing. I mean, it is a copycat league, and getting guys like that can pull parts from other people's game, then apply them to their own and kind of create a holistic pass rush repertoire. But what's really exciting about this, like on an individual level to the Bills, is obviously the lasting impact that Von Miller could have on the young guys that are currently on the roster when he's not even on the Bills anymore. And that's obviously, like you just did, and like fingers crossed, that is the hope. That really is. That's the hope from this whole thing. We're paying Von Miller, 3 years, but it's a 6-year deal. Who knows if he's going to see through all 6 years, but when he's not here in Buffalo, the hope is he had a lasting impact on those young guys.
Yeah. And that's been something that we've talked about all offseason. We talked about it, Kendall, when you and I kind of broke that news when it happened, like 6 minutes before we went live on this guy's coverage, which threw us for a tailspin. That was wild. It was insane. Our phones were going off left and right, and everybody was in the chat freaking out. Like, it was nuts. That was part of that piece, right? Like the on-field impact, but the off-the-field impact.
Exactly.
Like, what does he do in helping Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Carlos Basham and Ed Oliver and anybody else, not even on the defensive line? Like, how does he impact other players in terms of teaching them how to be a professional and hone their craft? You could be Dane Jackson or Kaiir Elam. You're not an edge rusher, but you see the way Von Miller approaches the game every day, and maybe you're like, you know what? I need to approach the game like that.
I mean, also think about it tangibly, like that way he could impact Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown, like just going up against them every day in practice and teaching them like, oh, this is what works against me. If you ever see someone with a similar build, similar archetype to me, this could work against that. Those kind of little things. It doesn't even go, like you said, to that defensive end group. It's holistically to the team.
Yeah, and even to the little things too, like if Von is going against Dion a lot in practice, and he's like, you know what, like I keep beating you like this because you're tipping this,
right?
Like you're doing this, and it's allowing me to take advantage of that and do this and that, and you start to pick up little tricks like that.
And that's the thing, these veterans like Von Miller, they're able to articulate the game.
Yes.
Not every player is able to do that, especially young players. Young players are just, again, kind of living off of their athleticism and their success in college and have to relearn the game in many ways when they get to the NFL level. So guys like Von Miller don't come around often, obviously, but especially in regards to being able to articulate the game and teach it to other guys. That's why a lot of people are like, as soon as he retires, he could easily be a coach because he's able to articulate and teach and convey what he's seeing, what he saw, his experience, but also how to counter and beat opposing offensive linemen in the league.